Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Paranormal Lens. My name's Chad Thomas, and I'm here with Jamie Widener, my co-host. How are you tonight, Jamie?
Whatever my name is, I don't know. Happy second Monday of the week, by the way.
I think I've looked and I've misspelled your name several times on the out credits. Sorry about that.
Oh, dude, I'll tell you what. If I had a nickel for every time it was spelled either the Jamie with a Jaime or Widener without one of the D's, either one or both, sometimes, who knows, I would be a rich man right now. So all good. I don't care.
All right. Well, so how's your week going, Jamie?
Dude, it's busy. It's happening. You know, we had a busy weekend, obviously, because we had an investigation at the brewery and then stuff to do back after. I came back, right? Finally, I'm off the IR, and just in time, apparently. Man, we were crazy active and just a really great group of guests too. I mean, it was we do 3 sessions. We explained this before, but 3 sessions, each one on a different space in the building, and every group I had was, and I were a team, but every group we had was just really point on and engaged, and and activity came with them. So really cool. And we're back this weekend too. So it's a short rest week, as the NFL players say. It's a Thursday game for us, but a short week kind of thing. But so it's just been running, and then life. How about you? What's going on?
We're getting busy at work, so things are picking up, which is good. So have a show that's got to go out in like less than 10 days, so that makes it pretty busy for us. So anyway, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about I think we're going with Pennhurst tonight. And I'm going to make a clarification. It is not Pennhurst Asylum. Pennhurst Asylum is the Halloween attraction that is done on the grounds of the Pennhurst State School and Hospital, the old Pennhurst State School and Hospital. When I was there back in May, they clarified that for me, and I was like, oh, that's a big distinction, an important distinction. So it was never called an asylum when people were there, when patients were there. So. And like I said to you off air, I got to quit taking these heavy ones. There's a lot of history here, and a lot of there's a lot. Let's just dig into it and go. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Let's figure it out.
All right. So Pennhurst State School and Hospital was a state-run facility that started off with the best of intentions, but turned into one of the most horrific places in the state of Pennsylvania. I can jump to the next slide. It's located in Spring City, Pennsylvania, which is only about 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. The Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic was established in 1908, and that was the official name of the school. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. The idea for the facility and others like it was to provide a safe haven for a vulnerable population. It was a place for the mentally challenged people to get the health care and special education that they needed to return home and be successful in the world. So that was the idea of the facility. That is not what happened. And I want to take a second here to say some of the terms that I'm going to use are difficult for me to say. I volunteer every summer for a week at a special needs camp, and some of the terms that were used as medical descriptions are now considered offensive. But they're part of our history, and I think it's important to remember that as we learn better ways and move on. Go ahead to the next slide. In 1876, the first meeting was held by the Association of Medical Officers of American Institutions of Idiotic and Feeble-Minded Persons. Now, there's a mouthful. The goal was to study causes, conditions, and statistics, and to discuss the training and education of feeble-minded persons. They also wanted to lobby for construction of institutions for care and treatment of these individuals. Between 1876 and 1905, many laws were passed on how to handle this group of people. Now, I'm not going to dive into it all here, but it is important to know that many things were happening to try and figure out what to do with this population. And it's about this time that we start to see the term eugenics appear in the United States and Europe, though it was not a new term by any means. On March 21st, 1905, the legislature of Pennsylvania passed an act for the prevention of idiocy. This act would have required all institutions that had feeble-minded people to have a physician on staff that would be trained to decide if an individual should be sterilized because of their mental capacity, and then a surgeon capable of sterilizing the patients. This bill was vetoed by Governor Samuel Pennypacker on March 30th, 1905, saying to permit such an operation would be to inflict cruelty upon a helpless class in the community, which the state has undertaken to protect. Efforts to pass such a bill were also voted on in 1911, 1913, 1915, 1917, 1919, and in 1921, another bill was passed, but this was also vetoed by Governor William Sproul, citing the equal protection requirements of the 14th Amendment. So as you can see, this was just an ongoing topic during this time, and not one that could have been an easy discussion. Congress authorized a facility, and construction started in 1903. The first set of buildings were completed in 1908. If you want to jump to the next slide. The facility was built on almost 634 acres of Crab Hill in Spring City. Crab Hill was a peninsula on the Schuylkill River. This was the beginning of the lower campus. It included boys' cottages, a dining hall, a kitchen, a storeroom, teachers' homes, a school, a laundry, and a sewing facility. There was also a powerhouse and a temporary administration building. Next slide. These buildings were labeled with letters that were used to reference each unit until they were given names in the 1960s. So for a lot of their time, they were just lettered. It was building A, building B, building C, whatever. So I found that interesting that they, in 1960, they were like, well, let's give them some names. So anyway, you can still see some of the letters on the remaining buildings. The new administration building was built in 1918. If we want to go to the next slide. And the infirmary and staff house buildings were built in 1921. The assembly hall was built in 1929, and this was used as an auditorium and a gymnasium. Now, as a side note, this building was recently reopened to the public at the last Paracon that was held in May of 2023. So it had been closed completely to the public, but they used that as a gathering space for their last Paracon. Let's see. In 1930, the upper campus or female colony was started. Building continued on and off until 1971. The final building was Horizon Hall, which was a hospital facility that is currently used as the Southeastern Veterans Hospital. The first patient, or patient number one, was admitted to the facility in 1908. When a patient was admitted to the hospital, they underwent an examination. They were evaluated in 3 different areas. Physical condition, so they were either epileptic or healthy. They had their dental status, which was either poor, good, or treated teeth, and their mental status. Now, there was a standard test established in 1901 by Henry Goddard, and it was called the Binet test. This established the different degrees of feeble-mindedness, and the breakdown was as follows. If you can jump to the next slide. An idiot was someone with an IQ of 0 to 25. An imbecile was somebody with an IQ of 26 to 50, and a moron was an IQ of 51 to 70. An interesting note here, the same test was used on everyone. It didn't matter if they were high functioning or not. Like it was just a blanket test that everybody took. Today, we know that there's more that is needed to be taken into account. And I find that over the years that those terms have been dragged into more of a derogatory term for people. But they were actually medical terms back in the early 1900s. The school opened with 500 court-ordered male youth. They came from 34 counties east of the Allegheny Mountains. It only took 4 years for Pennhurst to become overcrowded. It was intended to be a place for youth, but by 1912, it was already over capacity, and 10% of the population was over 20 years old. So now you had adults and youth living in the same buildings, same things, and it just not a good situation. As time went on, people didn't understand individuals with special needs, and they were pushing for them to all be institutionalized. This was forcing places like Pennhurst to accept all patients, not only the ones who could be educated. With this came the need for more state funding. With more state funding came people who were appointed to boards who didn't know anything about the needs of the patients. So it just became this bad cycle. The plan to educate patients and reintegrate them in society didn't pan out either. This also created another cycle. Since patients weren't leaving, they needed to build more buildings. Those who were capable of learning a vocation were mandated to work. If you jump to the next slide, Jamie. They were paid in Pennhurst cash, or the script currency is what it was called. So it basically made it like a company town, because they couldn't spend this anywhere outside of the facility. They couldn't exchange it, so they were just limited to what was brought in at their store. Some of the patients were given jobs that would create more funds for Pennhurst. This included mattress making, shoemaking and repair, grading, farming, laundry, domestic duties, sewing, baking, butchering, painting, and working in the store. And yes, David, this was a big shame of Pennsylvania. We'll hit that a little bit later. In 1916, the Public Charities Association of Pennsylvania sponsored a traveling exhibit on feeble-mindedness. The belief at that time was that if all feeble-minded women were separated from society, the issue of feeble-mindedness would cease to exist, and because they would not be able to reproduce. As a result of these ideas, next slide, Jamie, a female colony was established to institutionalize feeble-minded youth of both genders, separating them from society and one another. So this facility actually had an upper and a lower campus. One was male, one was female, and they weren't supposed to integrate. If you can jump to the next slide. On the outside, the facility looked like a picturesque campus. It would almost pass for a college campus these days. It was totally self-supporting. It operated a power plant, a treatment plant, produced food for the residents, and took care of its own security. What they couldn't produce in-house was supplied by a dedicated railroad station. There was no need to interact with the outside world, and that's how both sides liked it. Family visitors that came on visitation days would see their loved ones in a fancy room in the administration building while being monitored by staff. So they never knew what went on beyond the walls of the administration building. The patients were cleaned up, brought there for their visitation. Families came in and left and never knew anything was going on. But on the inside, conditions at Pennhurst deteriorated. There was not enough staff to take care of the patients who could not take care of themselves. The 1960s saw Pennhurst housing almost 2,800 people in a facility that should have had housed closer to 1,900. Only 200 patients were in any kind of self-improvement programs. Crumbling buildings were staffed by 9 medical doctors and 11 teachers. With a $4 million budget deficit, there was little to be done to improve conditions. Adults who were not self-sufficient were kept in large cribs and wore diapers. If they were lucky, the staff would change them once per shift. Sometimes there would be 2 staff per 3-story dormitory. Other patients were threatened with the duty of cleaning up and bathing other patients if there were behavioral problems. Some patients figured out that if they were violent, they could get more attention. So that's what they did to try to get more attention and get fed and get taken care of. Again, not a great situation. I'm going to play a video clip for you. It's about a minute long. This is from a 1968 5-part expose by a man named Bill Baldini. He was a reporter from NBC News 10. And it's this report that brought the attention to Pennhurst and started the wheels in motion. So here we go.
These are some of the sights and sounds of Pennhurst, the state institution for the mentally retarded. It's located in Spring City, Chester County. In 1908, when the institution first opened, the man in charge bitterly complained to the state that the conditions were already overcrowded. He transferred many of the patients to Q1, a classroom building. Many of them are still there. In the 18th century, the mentally retarded were often ignored, punished, and exploited. Today, things are supposed to be different. Modern 20th century man is much more scientific and civilized. Today, we no longer punish the mentally retarded. We don't exploit them either. We have come a long, long way. Now we ship them 25 miles out of town to a state-operated institution and forget them while they decay from neglect.
That's pretty heavy. So this is 1 minute from a 50-minute story. I haven't watched the whole thing, and I don't know if I could watch the whole thing. But if you're interested and want to see more about it, search for "Suffer the Little Children" by Bill Baldini. It's easily found on YouTube. Bill luckily found out about Pennhurst by accident one day. He was a reporter in the station looking for a story and didn't have anything going on. So he went across the street to a hotel and hoping he would find some sort of conference. And there was a group there that from the mainline Chamber of Commerce. Apparently they volunteered weekly at Pennhurst on Sundays, and they started telling Bill stories about what was happening there. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, and he said, if 10% of what you're saying is true, I'll do a report on this. I will get it on the air, and we'll see what we can do to help. Now, he didn't want to be a fraud, so he didn't want to go in pretending to be something and just as a reporter. So he actually joined the group, was sworn into the Chamber of Commerce as a member, and the next week he went with them to volunteer. He went with no camera, no recorder, just for the experience, and he got an experience he never expected. He left in shock. He went back to his station and talked to his supervisor, who was also shocked but didn't really believe him. He's like, you're just making up this story. It took some persuasion, but he finally got his supervisor to give him a cameraman and let's see what story they could find. So Bill took a crew out to Pennhurst, found the superintendent of the facility. His name was Leon Patkansky, and told him that he had seen things and he was going to do a story. Bill basically said if he wasn't granted access to film on location, he would stand outside and report every day, explaining what was going on inside, or Leon could let him in and see what they could do to get help. And he basically said, you need all the help you can get. Leon's response was, well, this is blackmail. And Bill said, you can call it what you want. I'm telling the truth. So eventually they got to the point that he let him in, did this 5-part expose, and like I said, got the ball rolling on changes. Unfortunately, it took another 19 years for the facility to be completely shut down. It took several lawsuits, including the groundbreaking Halderman versus Pennhurst State School and Hospital. The lawsuit was a groundbreaking civil rights case that opened the way for better educational opportunities and community-based living arrangements. It was settled in 1984, and the doors closed at Pennhurst in 1987. The property was retained completely by the state until the mid-2000s. Obviously, things got run down. If you're not taking care of property, it just runs down. In the mid-2000s, the upper and lower campuses were divided. The state retained control of the upper campus and is currently used by the Pennsylvania National Guard for training grounds, and also it's where the Southeastern Veterans Hospital is. The lower campus was sold to a group called the Hampton Real Estate Group with the intentions of demolishing the buildings and putting up offices. What they were unaware of is the buildings were filled with asbestos, and they were required to abate the asbestos before knocking the buildings down. Well, instead of hiring a professional company, they bagged all the asbestos and dumped it in the woods. Also, they found through the years that other trash companies, instead of taking things to landfills, were using the property to dump trash in, and just, EPA got involved and it was a mess. The buildings were stripped of anything useful or that could be sold, so all the copper was taken out from the roofs. A lot of the wiring was pulled. Any like beds or things like that were just taken and distributed. The development plan didn't go well because they didn't have a good reputation, and the property also had multiple zoning designations, so it was difficult to get it rezoned to what they needed. So they gave up, and it was eventually sold to a private owner. If you can go to the next slide. Most of the buildings have deteriorated and many have fallen down. Of the original buildings, I think there's only a handful, maybe 6 or 7 left. So the current owners are looking at ways to preserve the historic buildings and as a way to learn from mistakes of the past. Now I'm going to jump around a little bit here. If you want to jump to the next slide, Jamie. I mentioned earlier that they host an annual Paracon. This year, I decided to go to the Paracon. I purchased a VIP ticket, which allowed me access to a history tour, question and answer session with some celebrity ghost hunters, and an open investigation, as well as access to the Paracon itself. I drove down on a Friday night after work for the tour, the event, and the investigation. Jamie, I have a little bit of sensitivity to emotional feelings and things like that. So when I got about a mile from the site, according to my GPS, I got this overwhelming feeling of sadness. It was hard to explain. I'm like, why would I be feeling sad here? I'm not there yet. Why am I getting it here? Well, what I didn't realize is I was already on the original property. What's now the property, the property lines have shifted in a little bit. So I was on the original property, and that's why I was starting to feel what I was feeling. As I got closer to the main campus, the feelings got worse. As the evening went on, the feelings came and went. The tour was very informative, but sad. I would recommend anybody who's interested in parts of history or any of those things, take this history tour. It's well worth it. The tour ended at the assembly hall, which definitely had a lighter feeling than the rest of the building. So I could tell that this was a place where happiness was experienced versus some of the other things that were going on. The question and answer session was interesting. I got to hear experiences from ghost hunters, Project Fear, Kindred Spirits, and Jack Osborne. The investigation was fairly uneventful. It was difficult because it was basically a free-for-all for 3 to 4 hours. Not like how we run our investigations, which I've come to appreciate. This investigation, people were just going wherever they wanted. I met up with a group from Texas, and we investigated together in the infirmary, the Mayflower building, the tunnels, and one other building. Now, we had a couple of experiences, but nothing earth-shattering. I came back the next day for the Paracon, so I could see some friends in the industry, and the feeling was completely different. As I wandered through the vendors, I had a feeling of disgust. It was really weird. Like, I had sadness the day before, but this was like a different feeling of heart. Like, it was just like unhappiness with what was going on. So it felt to me like the energy that was there was disappointed with what was happening. There were groups from paranormal fields that were represented, but there were also oddity collectors. At one point, I saw someone putting on a straitjacket to pose for pictures. I then understood what I was feeling. The things that were part of a daily life here that were torturous were being shown as something interesting for a photo op. As I went through the buildings and grounds, I had a difficult time touching things like railings, door handles, and other normal things from the property. It almost felt like there was an electrical charge to them. Really hard to explain, but it was just like I pulled back a couple times because it was weird. It was just a weird feeling. I stayed for about an hour and then left because the feeling was so overwhelming to me and I felt nauseous. So, Jamie, the question we always come to is there something paranormal here? I would have to say yes. I didn't document anything specific. I went through and I found some documentation from other people who've been there. You've got shadow figures, you've got doors opening, you've got rocking chairs. Investigators are shoved, scratched, objects are thrown, EVPs, psychic mediums have multiple energies, and that's just in one building. Weird New Jersey has investigated, and they had a list of, I think, like 7 or 8 buildings that they investigated where they had hits and everything. The one building, there were loud noises from inside the building, but the investigators had surrounded the building, went in, there was nobody in the building, and there was no way for people to get out of the building. So, there's definitely a lot going on here. But looking at the history, I think we can understand why there was a lot going on here. So before we talk about what's going on now in the physical world, what are your thoughts, Jamie?
Well, I hate to say this, but I've never been. It's on the list, but it's just a place I haven't gotten to yet. So just like last week, with the mystery spot, I'm asking you on some place you haven't been to. So it's a little challenging, but I get it. And I spent 10 years in social services, health and human service, social services, and I've seen some things that align still to, within the last decade to the conditions that were established at this place when it's worst, that they still exist. There are people who are still without resources and have no other way to go, put in establishments that are treating them in the same spirit that Pennhurst was treating its last guests. And that just, it makes me sad. And it's just unacceptable that we live in, the richest country in the world, all the stuff we hear about America, and here we are still letting our people, live in these conditions. So it's really, that alone can, having my own experiences in similar places, it is in live places, for lack of a better way of saying it, operating places, I can understand the decades and decades of this of impressiveness and sorrow, that you got to feel in this place. And I get your feelings as you were approaching. I understand your feelings when you were there day 2. I'm surprised you lasted an hour. Let's just make people live in bad conditions and mock them later afterwards. Right. Taunt them more or less. So it has to have something going on. It has to, just with generations of mistreatment, just agony in the physical condition people were in, and they had nowhere else to go.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm a bit of loss of words.
Yeah.
It's just, obviously I haven't even been there, so I'm looking forward to the opportunity. But man,
yeah, it is definitely a place it's worth visiting on 2 levels. It's worth visiting on the historic civil rights side of it, and definitely doing the history tour and learning about what was there. They do history tours. They do photographic tours. Like, you can go in, I forget what you pay, but you go in for 3 or 4 hours, and they sort of just let you wander and take pictures, because there's still enough things there that are worth documenting. And having more people document it, it's social media. The more that's documented, the more it g's out there.
Before we move on, take a look here. So Bert saying the walkway between the 2 hospital wings was extremely sad. Heather and I could feel sadness on one side, but kind of happiness on the other, like from the kids that were too young to understand what was going on and just happy to see people.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then from Heather, I felt the same almost electric energy when I was touching things inside the building. There is a charge in there that is hard to explain. You just have to feel it. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate somebody else sort of understanding what I felt, because it's hard to, like I said, it's hard to explain. So it sort of makes me feel like I'm not completely crazy.
Yeah. And one more thing, this was a little while ago from Jim, but Willowbrook in New York, another facility, and one of many, right, that are around the country that can, felt the same struggles of financial resources, understaffing, over populated words. So
there were 2 in Pennsylvania. I mean, this wasn't the only one in Pennsylvania. There was a second one. It's hard. When I was thinking back about it, I did have some paranormal experiences. In the infirmary, I got to use some sensory deprivation glasses, which basically had like red LEDs flashing and then white noise in the ears. While I was doing that, people were asking questions. I didn't hear answers, but I got a lot of uneasy feelings, and possibly something touched me. In the dark, in a place like that, it's hard to say what touched me. In Mayflower, I remember the one session we were upstairs in a room, and there were a lot of people in the room. But they were asking questions, and getting knocking answers, which is something I hadn't experienced before. I mean, we use a lot of equipment when we investigate, and we always forget sometimes to go back to the basics, and that this was knocking, and it was like there were knocks in the room. When we ask questions, it's not like just a random knock, but there were also knocks down the hall. So it's like we were interacting with more than one spirit. One of the people that, again, we were wandering around seeing people investigating and just jumping in with them. There was somebody using what was called the Necrophonic app. It's an iPhone app or another phone app. They were communicating with a male spirit in the bathroom. So, it was just all sorts of just random things. In the basement of the Mayflower building, now there's no power in most of these buildings. I was getting K2 hits in that area without any power. So, it's just very strange. The tunnels, there were tunnels that went, like a lot of these old facilities, there were tunnels that went between the buildings for moving people in bad weather, moving things that you didn't want to be seen, underground. There were about 10 of us who ended up sitting at the end of one of these tunnels, and we had the lights out and the laser grid. We definitely heard movement and possibly a shadow in the laser grid. Again, it was the end of this tunnel where we used to go into a building, so there were old wheelchairs and things like that. So there's a lot of objects that could have been trigger objects. So yeah, there were definitely some interesting personal experiences. So what's next for Pennhurst? If you want to jump to the next slide. Pennhurst always does the Pennhurst Asylum. Now this is, I'm not sure if I said it earlier, Pennhurst Asylum is the Halloween attraction. There's a very definite distinction between that and Pennhurst School. When it was a school, it was never called an asylum. A lot of people have mixed feelings about the asylum or the Halloween attraction. It's got a lot of people upset because how can you go have this at a type of event at a place like that? So there's, like I said, there's multiple groups that feel it's inappropriate to have things on the grounds like this. But it comes back to that you need to raise money. So this event raises money to keep things happening and keep renovations happening for restoration. Now, one thing that I will say is when they were giving the tour, they did tell us that the Halloween attraction only happens in the administration building and on the outside grounds. It's not in any of the buildings where there would have been treatment happening or where people were living. So I mean, that's a little bit of make you feel better about it, but still not a lot. If you jump to the next slide, there's actually a Facebook group called Make Pennhurst Abandon Again. They'd sort of like to have all the ghost hunts, the Halloween things, all that go away, and just sort of let it be what it was, or let it be the abandoned situation. I have a little bit of a problem with that because that will just deteriorate this building and let it go down the drain, and we will forget this part of history. Let's see. There's another group out there, if you want to jump to the next slide, called the Pennhurst Memorial and Preservation Alliance. And it is a group that has a vision to be part of an effort to create a world-class museum to honor and memorialize the ongoing civil and human rights struggle of Americans with disabilities at a location of national significance to assure that we never go back. Now, they currently run a museum in collaboration with the Pennhurst LLC in the Mayflower Building. This commemorates the historic institution for people with disabilities. One thing that I learned on the tour was that the museum does not want to take any state or federal money. And there's a good reason for that. They want to be able to be honest with what happened there and not hide anything from history. So they don't want to take money from the state and then have the state say, well, you can't talk about that. So, I mean, I think it's honorable that they're trying to do this on their own. Let's see. I've got one more video I want to play, and then we can come back and follow up with any other questions or whatever. This is from the Pennhurst Memorial Preservation Alliance website. So I'm just going to run it.
We have a chance to share with the whole culture in America that there's a great, truly noble civil rights movement that almost nobody knows about. And it's inspiring for everyone, I think, to think that people who were downtrodden and isolated and disrespected and denied their rights could come so far that they are now part of us. They're not them anymore, they're us. That's the central theme of all this.
We want to have a museum is because we must never forget people who lived in the institution. We must never go back. We must never forget the struggle that people with disabilities have gone through and are still going through today.
So yeah, like I said, it's a pretty heavy one, huh, Jamie?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the struggle is real, and yeah, that's an overstatement, an overused statement. But the reality is that even today, we expect people with disabilities to have a cast or a crutch or a wheelchair. If you don't see a physical ailment, that doesn't mean a person doesn't have a disability. And we're still fighting that stigma, and I think we probably will be for quite a while. But we're getting better at it, and we were doing better with legislation to help support those individuals. But I was I had the opportunity. We're very close to Millersville, and you live in Millersville, but Millersville University hosted a bus that was traveling the country 2-3 years ago to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act. And I kept thinking to myself, it's only 25 years old, and it was a stop that day where they came in and took over kind of the Student Memorial Center and lectures all day and a history lesson, and the bus itself had history on the side of it that was visible, and it was just it was a pretty special day to be a part of that. And I it's dear to me. My grandmother had a disability, so it's personal to a degree, but just thinking that the life that she lived, long before we had legislation, and even then, for enforcement, it's a very difficult thing. So there are a lot of people who really could deserve a museum like this, and have the supports that they need. Super cool.
So one thing that I will say, I'm not pushing for anything, but the Alliance is always looking for donations. They're looking for two types of donations. They're looking for financial donations, but they're also looking for artifacts from the facility. Basically, when this sat abandoned for years, people just came in and took things. Sure. And that's how these things go. They basically have said, if artifacts are returned, there will be no questions asked. They just appreciate the donation. So it's sort of it's how why would you want to collect something like that unless you were lived there, part of it, and it was important to you? But just the energy that something like that's got to hold I wouldn't want it in my house.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it wouldn't be allowed in your house either, Jamie.
Well, that's that's a thing by itself, right? And that's the reason, we see in cemeteries, we see tombstones knocked over and broken in pieces, missing. Like the piece didn't just walk; it didn't fall away. It's there. Somebody took it on purpose. And it's like, why? And I'm never going to knock somebody in our field or people with interest in our field, because it is there. There's a lot of uniqueness, right? We've met some very unique people, and I love them all, right?
Right.
But there are those who are, don't always have good intentions, and sometimes don't realize the unintended consequence of what they've done, and like the attachment or some of the negativity that could come home with them, and they don't know what to do with it, so then they just dispose of it. They don't really deal with what they've done, or even consider taking it back, which might really resolve the issue to begin with.
Right.
So, there's a couple things I want to share with you from Bert and Heather. I thought this was interesting. The tunnels. I had a boy. He told me his name was Thomas, but everyone called him Tommy. He liked walking around with people investigating.
Now that she said that, I do remember that that's a story that's been told there, that there is a Tommy in the tunnels. So.
And also, wish we could see all the buildings. Walking across the grounds, we could feel we were being watched from one of the outer buildings. Mm-hmm. So that's not unusual, right? Especially with sprawling properties, multiple buildings and things like that. I can certainly understand it. And yeah, I'm with you on this one, Bert. Hell no. Taking something out of the place. Oh no, it's not coming home.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
so,
like
Chad, I guess the question I want to ask you: have you been there, done that, haunted or not?
Hell yes. Yeah, I mean, like I said,
you going back?
Yeah, I would go back. The more I learn, go ahead.
I was gonna say going back, but not with or at a Paracon or one of these kind of conglomerate public events, like a group investigation issue, opportunity, something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I could go back to a Paracon there. I just think the energy was so distraught, I think is a good word for it. And I like I said, I felt sick. I literally had to, and I took some of the friends I was looking for there, I didn't really get to see. And I told them, they're like, we get it. We understand. I can't imagine having to spend a day at a Paracon there talking to people, and I guess some people have better ways of blocking it out, but I'm not there.
Right.
So, but yes, I would like to go investigate and do a real investigation where it's not chaos.
Yeah, we made jokes about this already, but we've had an experience like that with an investigation at a correctional facility somewhere in the western end of Virginia, but which was a free for all, and there was so much corruption of evidence, firstly, and there's just a disjointedness then too of energy, because everybody's got their own agenda of what they want to see, what they want to do, where they want to spend time, and it's just so it's confusing, and the spirit wouldn't know what to do, like obviously. We're not trained monkey, dealing with trained monkeys here kind of thing. Spirits are people, and they can and cannot interact if they wish to or wish not to. It's up to them. And I totally appreciate that. It'd be no different if you were coming to hang out, somewhere I was, and, I'm just not in the mood for this. I'm going to go over here, free will.
And we had 12, 15 people.
Yeah, it was a lot, not a lot overall for the size of the facility.
Right.
But,
this was 200,
Yeah, that's crazy.
Just going wherever they wanted and trying to catch up with, they wanted to investigate with, the person from Ghost Hunters or the Project Fear crew. And it's like, that's not what I'm there for. I'm there to
invest. It would be bad if you did it though.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's like 5 a.m. at Walmart on Black Friday, right? They open the doors and everybody just bursts through and they're running to grab stuff. I get that feel for it.
Yeah. So, yeah, Heather's sensitive as well, and definitely saying the energy was overwhelming and thick is, that's a good way of explaining it. And Bert, I think you're right. I think there's so many that are still there and will always be there, just because of how they were treated and how they ended. And
well, many grew up there, right? Coming in very young, and then not having a resource to exit to, because again, lack of programming or lack of familial supports. Those things are critical, and that's how people. I mean, I'm going wax poetic for a second, but that's how people stay in the cycle for life, because there's no exit velocity for them, because there's not enough resource trees, for them to pick things from that they need, and or they age out of programs and then they move into another one that's a starting point, and then some programs have such long waiting lists that they never really get access to it because they just can't get past the line in front of them. So without anywhere else to go, they stay in the space to that. And then, somebody comes behind them as well. And, the facility is trying to bring bodies to them, because every head, every bed count is revenue.
Yep.
Every head count is a revenue piece for them.
Exactly.
And that challenge then is, how do you fit more people in? Because more people equal more money. And then, people get burned out, staff and administration even gets burned out from this. They start to disappear slowly, sometimes steadily in other instances. And then you have overcrowding and understaffing, and conditions just deteriorate rather fast. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's an age-old playbook that is, like I said, still going on today in certain facilities and spaces.
When I took the tour, I remember one of the stories that they told us was a mother was forced by the court to, after she gave birth, because she was challenged, the mother was forced to put her child in the facility, and the mother would go visit once a week, because I think visitations was, you were allowed to visit, I think, on Sundays, and there may have been one other day of the week. So they would, religiously go every week and visit, and the child would be like, "Mommy, why am I here? Why can't I go home with you?" Right. And there's just no explanation. And eventually, the mother stopped going because there was, it was a court mandate. She didn't have a choice. She couldn't take this child home, and it's just things like that.
Absolutely.
There was another story I alluded to about somebody whose family would come and visit, and they started talking about the situation and what was happening. And that is when they were threatened with, "Do you want to go on the duty to clean up after other people? Do you want to change diapers? Do you want to give baths?" So that forced them to stop talking about what was happening inside the walls. They just, they didn't have a solution, so they just covered it up, which is what's so scary. Anyway.
Yeah, it's heavy, and it's a reality thing. It's a reality check for a lot of people, because most of us don't know that these situations existed as past tense, but currently still exist, and again in certain spaces. And it is. It's tough. It's heavy.
Yeah. So, well, but there are opportunities to volunteer out there and help, and that that's why I take a week a year and go do that. I cook for a week. It's not like I'm actually involved one-on-one with helping, the campers that we work with, but I feel like I'm still doing my part. So.
Absolutely. Well, I again, being in the nonprofit world, I can tell you that many organizations can't function without volunteer supports in all levels of opportunities. Even if somebody's just coming around and emptying trash cans at the end of the day or something, that would help, because that offsets the need to have a cleaning crew, and that's just a cost. And, obviously helping the physical stuff, cooking is a huge aspect of it, especially when there's resident staff. residents and staff to manage. So every hour matters at a social service or an entity that requires volunteers to run. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. So,
all right.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, we might want to wrap this one up. I think we've exhausted this. So let's talk about what we got going on. I alluded to this at the beginning. We had an investigation last Saturday evening at the brewery. We're right back again because it's spooky season, and that's what we do. So we're here Saturday evening. Tickets are still available, though they're going fast. So the link below at saverstub.com will get you there. We had a ton of activity this week, and I haven't even had a chance to even listen to the audio yet. But personal experiences on all levels and engagement that was just unique for us. So
how about the catacombs, Jamie?
Oh my gosh, dude, I keep thinking about it. Like I've never had that. We had a dual flashlight situation with a yes no response that was literally pulling yes and no responses as requested. We found out some things that we need to verify that I won't want to share here quite yet because it may not be true, but some things that, if true, are a little shocking, a little surprising, I should say, more than shocking, about something that happened there with staff. But man, oh man, yeah.
And we even skipped the one catacomb because we were being drawn up to the other one, which was, we were all set up to go, and it was like, nope.
Yeah, let's just move. We're being pulled. So, and that's how investigations go. Sometimes you are just you feel the need to be somewhere else, and along the path that you're on, and you move. And that's just what we did, and I'm glad we did. And it was our last session of the evening, so way to finish strong on that. So hopefully more activity this week as well. The following weekend, though, Saturday the 14th, it is the Albatwitch Festival here in Columbia at the River Park, and this is a fun event, everybody. If you're anywhere near South Central PA on that day, find your way to Columbia. Google it. It's the 10th or 12th annual. It's a thing. It's a big day. A lot of fun, a lot of vendors, a lot of information around the Albatwitch, which is our local mini Bigfoot. Been seen by many, but captured by none. So we did a little bit of this on the Urban Legends episode. I think it's 11 to 5 that day. So food, fun. Us will be there with a booth, I believe. So cool stuff. Then right back again to the brewery for another public investigation. On the Thursday, the 26th, we're in the Columbia Mardi Gras Halloween Parade. This will be our third year with as a support to that, and we in our category, two-time champion. That's gonna be hard to defend because every year it gets tougher. But we're looking forward to it. It's a night of fun. It's a lot of fun. We have candy for the kids, and it's a spooky evening around town. Market House is open. It's just a lot of fun. And Locust Street, our main drag, is covered in vendors. It's a party atmosphere because again, it's Mardi Gras for us, but for a Halloween theme. And then we're getting out of spooky season and into November with 2 events coming up on the 4th and the 18th over at the brewery. And we are planning where we're going to be and do for next year already too. So we'll have some of those dates coming up as we get closer to the end of the year. And hopefully we'll see somebody around the way. You see some cool places that we can get out to as well.
I'm looking at tickets, Jamie. There's 13 left for this week.
Okay.
But November 4th, there are only 8 tickets left for that night.
Wow. Okay.
So,
there we are.
So get your tickets early.
Yeah. Don't wait. They go fast. And of course, come early, have dinner at the brewery. The catacombs or the bottling works. I believe the beer garden is still going to be open through October. Great outside space as well, and fun atmosphere there too. So, Booby's Brewery has it going on. So, not just with us, but all kinds of cool stuff. All right. If you haven't figured this out already, we're on social media. Since you found us on social media, but we also have a TikTok page. It's really fun and active, and Instagram, and of course YouTube with some videos and stuff out there too. So give us a like, give us a follow, and we'll give you more content of where we're up to and what we're doing and things we find along the way. Plus, obviously, more episodes of Paranormal Lens as we go.
And right now, the best way to get a hold of us is through the Facebook page. Message us there. Drop us a line if there's something you want to hear us talk about. If you are interested in being on the show with us, if you have an experience you want to share, we're game.
we are easily influenced for ideas for the episode. So we have a plan for quite a few coming, but we're always looking for more things. And it's always fun to have engagement with our guests and see what we can find out on what's going on in the world. So please do.
Yeah, definitely. Any final thoughts, Jamie?
Well, speaking of episodes, next week, next week it's me. So you're stuck with that. Sorry, guys. But I am going to explore what is called the Alaskan Triangle. And I think we've all heard of the Bermuda Triangle before, from the island of Bermuda over to Florida and out to the Bahamas, this mysterious kind of triangular shaped area out in the Atlantic Ocean that had for many, many years, decades, if not centuries, anomalous things happened, ships and planes, people all just went missing. Some to never be traced back. It's just gone. And in that, it's its own mystery. There is an area in Alaska that stretches from Anchorage in the east to Juneau in the southeast, Anchorage in the west, Juneau in the southeast, all the way up to Burrow, which is basically up at the Arctic Circle. And the space in between is an imperfect circle. There's a word for that. And I'm sure I'll figure it out by the time we get to Tuesday, the type of triangle that it is. But what happens inside of it is exactly the same kind of stuff that's happened forever in the Bermuda Triangle. People go missing, planes go down, disappear, and all kinds of suspect things as far as what's out there. Obviously, I think one we're all familiar with is this guy named Bigfoot. So, but then there's other native urban legends of what could also be going on out there. And some of this is, some of it's physical. There's things. I don't want to give too much away for that, but some of it is definitely an oddity or a paranormal thing happening. So I'll dig into it, and we'll have some discussion and see where we're at with it. So tune in next week, Tuesday at 9 for the Alaskan Triangle.
Very cool. So,
all right. Anything for you, sir? Thanks for the episode, by the way. I know that was tough, but that was really, you really wrapped us around it really well. So I appreciate that.
Sure. I enjoy the research. Sometimes, like I said, it gets heavy, but we're all learning, so that's important.
Absolutely.
So, okay. Yeah, I think the only thing left to do, is get off the air and check out the Phillies game.
Anyway.
So, all right. Well, we will see everybody either Saturday night at Boobies or next Tuesday right here.
All right.
So, all right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Good night.